Hello, I'm Theron Ramacharaka. Again! Hi again! So this is about the power of will, just like my former video that I just finished uploading. That one was called Simple Technique for Cultivation of Willpower? Question mark. I'm using question marks now because, maybe posed as a question, I'll get more clicks, then more people can benefit from what I'm saying. Simple technique for cultivation of willpower? Huh? Okay, well, this one is kind of like a follow-up, but it's a standalone as well. All right, so I'm going to address at least two things. I have two things in mind directly here, or immediately. One is, these two things come from things that somebody else has said lately. So, I don't know. Maybe this will be of value to that person if they ever happen to see this video. But this is going to be helpful for you too. Okay, listen. Aleister Crowley, once called the wickedest man on earth. He knew a thing or two about use of will. I don't know if you know much about him, but he was a black magician, a white magician, a Satanist, of this, of that, and the everything. And he kind of used it all indiscriminately, I think. And, he became a very formidable force in the world of magic. And his techniques, he wrote prolifically, by the way. There's some very authoritative works on the matter, but I don't advise you to follow his works at all. But, his works were combined with the ancient, the Middle Ages works of a guy named Solomon, who wrote some pretty hardcore text about how to invoke and evoke demons to do shit for you. So, his work was taken pretty seriously, and it is serious stuff. But he said his most famous quote is, "Love is the law, love under will." The other famous quote is, "Do as thou wilt." Okay. Or do as you will to do. All right. Now, the comment made to me lately was, unfortunately, Aleister Crowley said, "Do as thou wilt," which has misled a lot of people because, it just means go ahead and do whatever you feel like doing. Damn the consequences. Don't worry about anybody else. Just do whatever it is you want to do. Run all over everybody. If that's, usually like Nietzsche seemed to imply. Just in the name of the book that Friedrich Nietzsche's sister published after Friedrich died, will to power. Do as thou wilt. Stomp all over everybody. Become the strong man. Well, I'm Turk Strongman, right? And I'm saying something different. I take it that what Crowley was getting at with the simple standalone phrase, "Do as thou wilt." If this is not what he intended, then this is what I intend with it. But I think it's what he intended too. It's on a positive side. Just like I said in that last video, when I was giving you a simple technique for the cultivation of willpower, at one point, right about in the middle of the video, I said, if you're going to follow through with this technique, if you're going to decide to practice the technique, and then with each application of it, it involves making a decision and then following through. If you don't follow through with either, if you've made the decision to use the technique and then practice it, and then you don't, or in the practice of it, it involves making a decision to do something you'd prefer not to do, but you go ahead and do it. Either way, at either level of this, if you make the decision as an act of will, and then you don't follow through, you don't have continuance following that decision, you weaken your power of will. It doesn't increase, it doesn't strengthen, it doesn't stay the same, it actually weakens if you don't. So you must do as you willed. Get it? Did you see what I'm saying? If you want to develop or cultivate your use of the power of will, you must practice following through with your decisions. Decision being a mode of willpower operation, continuance being another. And if continuance does not follow decision, you weaken your power and will. So what you will to do, and be careful what the content of that is. But, if it's something constructive, okay, let's just assume it is, right? Then you have to follow through. You must do as you will to do for there to be benefit. Not just in the thing itself, or with respect to the thing itself, like come up with, produce a result, but in strengthening your will as well. And if the result you want is strengthening your use of will, then it's even more important, right? You must follow through. Do as thou wilt. And I think that's what he was getting at. If it's not, then that's what I'm getting at with the same phrase. Just take it as a rule. Go back, go look at that other video. It's video number 250 here. You see down at the bottom of some of my videos, my material. Numbers, video number such and so. It's video number 250. When you come to that part of the video, just sum that little part up as do as thou wilt. Like make it a rule for the practice of the technique. Do as thou wilt. All right. Here's another one. William Walker Atkinson. I got this from him. The two mentative poles. You'll find that as a very early chapter in his Mind Power book, which I have narrated chapter by chapter, and it's all right here on this channel. Not the last few chapters yet, but I'm uploading them. They're coming. All right. A very early chapter is called The Mentative Poles. The one pole being desire, the other pole being will. So they're opposing poles. Now, somebody said, I don't think that desire and will are polar opposites. I don't necessarily agree with that. Well, I think that whoever said that, the person who said that, would agree with it if maybe I clarified something. So, I use that terminology a lot here. Desire and will being two mentative poles. Poles means like, on the opposite ends of the scale, on the opposite ends of a straight line. Like over here, plus, negative. Positive integers, negative integers, hot, cold, blah, blah, right? All right. I don't take those to be opposing poles. But I use that terminology a lot. It comes into play a lot, even if I don't say it, in a lot of what's going on here in this channel. So I need to this in case you are somebody who would disagree with that statement. I need to clarify this and hope to get your agreement on this so that we can stay on the same page with our terms and our ideas rolling along here. It's not the terms that are important. It's what they mean. Okay, so let's get to what I mean and what William Walker Atkinson meant. We could take it that those are opposing poles. If we take it that they push toward opposite results. But they don't. In fact, I think a follow-up to that comment, I don't think that they are opposing poles. I think a follow-up was, like a bit of support for the disagreement over what I had proposed once when I spoke of them being opposing poles, or the two mentative poles. I think the addendum was, or the description was, they must work together. Well, yeah. They're not opposing each other with respect to the result. They can, but it's not necessarily. It's not part of their essence to do that. No. If we take it that one repels and the other one draws, like will is a driving force, a pushing outward, and desire is a drawing. Will is a power that pushes outward, not a force. A power. Powers drive, push. They are outward movements, in a sense. But it's not repulsion. Desire is a drawing force, a force that holds together, that draws in. Okay? Well, if this does not mean by opposing pole, the opposing pole being will, that it's rejecting, repelling. No. It's pushing toward a goal. Whereas the other, desire, is, let's say, drawing the goal to us. Or drawing ourselves toward the goal. It's a drawing in. The other one is a pushing forth. But they're both working into the same thing. We would hope. They don't necessarily have to. I hope this clarifies it. They have opposite actions, but they don't work toward opposing results. They go about the same things in opposing ways, but they're not conflictual ways, we would hope. By opposing, I don't mean conflict. Of course, there can be conflict. And sometimes there needs to be conflict. And these should be done willfully. We should have control over this. Right? We can use will to tame down desire. Or to redirect the desire. And we can, and desire gives will a direction to push in. Sovereign will, dominant desire. These are terms of William Walker Agnew, once again. Credit goes to him for that. Right? Now, if desire gets out of control, which it can, it will go way out of control. If will is not used to keep it focused. All right? To keep it focused on constructive things. To keep it focused on things that the will wants to push toward. But, without desire, will has nothing to push for. So, one can be used to manage the other, and the other one can be used to give the other direction. But they must work together. You see, you cannot have that working that way. You cannot have that cooperation to keep both harmonized and synchronized with one another without both of them there doing what they do. So now here's an example of them working together. All right? I'm just going to make up something here. I'm not even going to pick something specific. Let's just say there's a constructive goal and there's desire involved with it. So it's a motive. There's emotional content. So it's a motivating goal. It's a motive. All right? Something to, work for. Something you desire to bring into your life. Desire to bring into your life. To bring into your life. Get that? The very terminology, desire to bring in. Desire. Bringing in. The will to work for, work toward. All right? Outward. Put those two together. You can picture, let's say, I'm drawing myself toward that. Or is it I'm drawing it toward me? Who cares, right? Maybe it's both. But there's a drawing. A drawing. That's desire. Or it's out there and I have to push toward it. That's will. Will working with desire. Get it? You get both. You've got the drive toward it and you've got the drawing toward it or the drawing it in. You're drawing it in and you're pushing yourself to it. Together. Desire and will. But they work in opposing ways. Not conflictual ways. I didn't say that. Yeah, I said it a minute ago, but in the same context. That's not what we mean by opposing. We don't mean working against each other. Although they can. And when that happens, we have one overpowering the other. They must work together, or we're out of line. We're out of order. Consider the universal law of order. Well, we're out of order. We got the two mentative poles, which work in a strictly polar opposite way. It's just a matter of poles, positive and negative poles. One's drawing, one's pushing. When you have electricity, batteries, battery terminals, one's positive, one's negative. We may not know which direction electricity really goes, but we're assuming that it goes in one of these directions, okay? Well, whichever it is, we've got one pole pulling the electricity over there, the electron flow, the current over there, and we got the other one pushing it over the other way, okay? So, it works together, okay? Like this terminal is pushing the current there, and this terminal is drawing it over there. You see? They are opposing poles, but they're not in conflict. They're not standing opposite each other and fighting. Now, if one overpowers the other, you're going to have an electrical problem. And I guess if everything boils down to electricity anyway in this world, in this universe of conscious substance in motion, well, there's a very good analogy. A strong one. Now, that's what we mean by opposing poles. The mentative poles. And I hope that clears things up. The last thing I want to say, this will be number 3. The cultivation of the use of willpower. I want to point this out. I pointed it out elsewhere. Here on this channel. Cultivate the use of will. All right? But let me just back up a little bit. Because there's something else I want to throw in here too. A long time ago, I was in numerous drug recovery programs. My God, when it comes to drug recovery, okay, here's a slight aside. I've been in every level. Well, I started out in San Francisco. I even visited the original drug recovery program that there is. That there was. It was on the corner of Haight and Asbury Streets, right next to Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. I forget what the place is called. Maybe the Recovery House. Something very basic like that. Or the Haight Recovery House. Something like that. It was the very first thing of this kind. But I did not attend that one. I wish I had. I learned about it a little after I got involved in some other ones. But I've been through primary. I've been through inpatient. I've been through a variety of approaches to it. I've been through maintenance. I've been through all of these phases, okay? But okay, that said now, I was in one once. I got a DUI because I took my sleeping medication. And before it kicked in, I went out. I mentioned this too in a video about, an automobile accident or something like that. Okay, so anyway, I got involved in a car crash because the sleeping medication kicked in before I could get to the store and get what I needed before I could get back home and go to bed. It kicked in pretty fast, faster than usual. And I fell asleep at the damn wheel and I ran into another car. Okay, so I had to go to, I was considered driving under the influence. Yes. I was. But it wasn't anything illegal, it was prescribed medication. I just took a risk, and it didn't work. Very well. So here I am in another drug recovery program. It was court mandated, and I had to attend this group session thing, which I don't think worked very well. Yeah, I'm not a group session kind of guy. No. And it was mamby-pamby. It was just something to have to go do, to meet a requirement. There was nothing to be got out of it. Nobody got cured of anything in there. It was just some silly thing. But anyway, I mentioned use of will. Now, me saying that, I'm coming from this whole background about cultivation of will, personal involvement, all the things that have to be included. comprehensive program, including the cultivation of the use of will, as one little aspect. You know, at least cultivation of the use of will to control attention to the rest of the things that need to be done for personal evolvement. I'm coming from this background, this matrix of concepts, all practical, all pragmatic, all right? And I get interrupted. Oh, the use of will, huh? Yeah, this practitioner sitting there with her bachelor's degree in whatever, social work or something, you know, pissed off at the world because her dad was a drug addict or something, and now she's going to, run a drug recovery program, and she wasn't going to let anybody in that group get a word in edgewise. She's going to play hardball. She's going to play attack therapy. I mentioned the use of will. I didn't even finish my sentence. And she butts in, oh, the use of will, huh? Yeah, let's see how far willpower will get you. You're just going to dig in your heels and overcome your problem, huh? Your drug problem. I keep hearing that. I hear that all the time. And that's the kind of stinking thinking that gets people in here. It doesn't work. Well, yeah. Right. Yeah, there's more involved than just that. Hell, people wouldn't be there if they had good use of will. Willpower is weak by addiction. Addiction weakens it severely. Every time a person decides I'm not going to do it anymore, and then they keep on doing it, whatever their addiction is, their will weakens. There's an enormous drain on access to universal will, or individual access to and use of universal will. It's an enormous drain on that. It fizzles out. So yeah, that's not going to work. There has to be more. Yeah. Now I'm going to give you one more. You can add this into the simple technique for cultivation of willpower, question mark. Remember, you are accessing will and using it. It's not yours in the first place. There is no individual will. There is an individualized access to and use of it, but will is will. Wherever it shows up, just like electricity is electricity, wherever it shows up, it's part, in like a little picture of electricity here in the world. We have a power plant, right? Maybe a nuclear power plant or whatever. And then we've got the power grid. And we all tap into it. Some of us use it more than others. But it's all the same electricity. It's all part of a bigger grid. Blow that whole thing up into, like the picture of universal something. Like will. It's a grid. It's the willpower grid. And we have individual access to it and use of it. So what we're talking about with cultivating our own will, cultivate your power of will, cultivate your willpower, gain strong willpower, gain ironclad willpower, yours. No, we're talking about access to the universal grid and use of it and control over how we use it. That's what we're talking about. I want to make that clear here because people don't say that. And we get the wrong idea from it. And it cuts us off. That wrong idea that we're separate from this grid. That there's not really a grid. That it's all just this little thing in here called will, locked in here, and then there's yours over there, and they're not connected. And ours are not connected to anything else greater. Well, that cuts us off. That's an involuntary or even voluntary. Unfortunately, if it's voluntary, oh my God. But it's an involuntary, it's out of ignorance. A cutting off. Out of ignorance. A major cutting off that access. Because we're not even recognizing the access that we're having. That there is something that we're accessing and using. That's almost like slapping universal will in the face. It's a living thing, isn't everything? It's part of nature. It's conscious substance in motion. We've got to realize what we're doing, where we fit in the picture. That will help you. That will enormously supplement your simple technique for cultivation of willpower if you remember what you're really cultivating. You're cultivating your access to and use of and control over your use of universal willpower. That's part of the great, willpower grid. Remember that. Picture it happening. As you're cultivating your willpower, to use the pedestrian terminology here, picture that happening. Picture universal will flowing into and through you and out through your actions. It's passing through. Realize where it's coming from, what it's going through, and how it's exiting in the form of actions that affect other people and that affect your life. You're using something sacred, if you want to put it that way, if you want to get a little spiritual about it. If you want to get Christian about it, you're using God's will. You're letting God's will flow through you. You want to put it however you like. Just remember where you stand with it. You want to cultivate your use of willpower? Well, then remember this part here too, what I just said. This third thing that I said about willpower. The first one is, do as thou wilt. The second is, desire and will are mentative poles. They are not opposing one another in what they do, unless they're out of sync with one another. But it's not necessarily, it's not part of their definition to be that way. No. And number 3, universal will is what we're accessing and cultivating our use of and access to. So how are you going to cultivate your access to it if you don't even know it's there? You may, be slowly increasing your access to it, but what if you know about it and you intend that to happen? And you picture it happening. And you desire that to happen. You will that to happen. Huh? That's a big supplement. It should be number 1. It should be your primary method for cultivation of power of will. That should come first. So always bring it into conscious awareness whenever you're doing any other technique to cultivate your willpower, to develop ironclad will, whatever you want to call it. Just remember, the pedestrian and usual, typical, everyday terminology about this is not accurate. Okay? Get the accurate thing going in your head. The meaning, the real truth behind it. Okay? What the inaccurate words should be saying or should mean, they mean when if they were accurate. All right? I'm Theron Ramacharaka. Be well.